Last week, I told you about a law passed in Montana that says if a gun is made in Montana and kept within the state boundaries, the federal government cannot regulate it. My next guest argued a states' rights case before the Supreme Court when he defended the power of California to authorize medical marijuana. He says there are holes in this Montana gun law, but we got to get it right. Randy Barnett is a professor at Georgetown Law. He is the author of Restoring the Lost Constitution. Randy, first, what is the point of this gun law? Why is this important?
Well, the point of the law is to see to it that there might be a complete intrastate trade in guns, and that intrastate trade would then be immune from federal regulation.
Okay.
But the problem is...
Wait, before you get into the problem, why is that important?
Well, that's important because originally in our system of federalism, the states were supposed to have general police powers, and the U.S. government, the Congress, was only supposed to have specific and enumerated powers.
Right.
And one of the powers they have is the power to regulate commerce among the several states. That's commerce that takes place between one state and another.
Okay.
But they're not supposed to have the power to regulate wholly intrastate commerce.
Right. And so this is where we get the hourly wage. We get everything. Everything. You can't regulate yourselves. You can't regulate your own business. The state can't do it anymore. It's got to abide by federal law, which all the states are different. It's bad for some states.
Well, states can regulate much of this. The problem is that they can't render state activities, intrastate activities, immune from federal law. In other words, in California, there's a Compassionate Use Act with respect to medical cannabis, but that couldn't immunize users from federal prosecution under the Controlled Substances Act.
You're saying that this law may be, if it's done right, may be the trigger to cut all that red tape out?
Well, I don't think the Montana law is done right, unfortunately. I don't think it sufficiently insulates the gun market from the interstate market to do the trick. And there is discussion between the Montana folks and the folks in Texas and in Utah to see if they can't try to insulate that gun market a little bit more than the Montana statute does.
Okay, what is the problem with it?
Well, the problem is that the Supreme Court has a doctrine that says that whenever any activity has a substantial effect on interstate commerce or is part of a broader regulatory scheme at the national level, then the federal government can reach it. So the argument has to be made that this internal market for guns has no effect on interstate commerce, and is also it's not necessary for the Congress to reach it as part of a broader regulatory scheme. And I don't think that the Montana statute is going to stand up to scrutiny.
I can't imagine that that could be held that way either. Do you have some suggestions? And we'll get them from you next. So we're back with Randy Barnett. He's a professor at Georgetown Law and author of Restoring the Lost Constitution. And boy, I got to tell you, Randy, it is totally lost. It doesn't resemble anything like what we had 100 years ago by any stretch of the imagination as far as freedom goes. I don't understand your take on the regulating the gun laws or the states' rights issue in this. I understand this as really a turnkey. A lot of people say that this is a turnkey if the Supreme Court sides with Montana, if this particular law would go through, or a state like Tennessee is working on it, or Utah or Texas, that it really changes fundamentally a lot of things. But I gather from you that you're looking at it as we'd still need to replace it with all of the other state regulation that might even have to be more than we have on federal regulation? Is that...
No, what I'm saying is I don't think the Supreme Court is going to buy it, and that's the problem. The Supreme Court didn't buy the medical cannabis argument. I don't think they're going to buy this argument unless you can somehow completely assure them that the state market, the intrastate market, is totally divorced from the federal market, the interstate market. In the cannabis case, the Supreme Court found, or they were open to the argument, that cannabis is cannabis. You can't tell in-state cannabis from out-of-state cannabis. It's fungible. So what they're trying to do in Montana is they're marking every gun one time made in Montana, but I don't think that's going to be good enough. I think all the parts or many of the parts have to be marked, and maybe ownership of in-state guns, Texas guns, let's say, have to be limited to people who have concealed carry laws under the state of Texas in order to insulate that market from the interstate market. But I'm not even sure that's going to work. In other words, I don't think it's going to be a winning argument.
So do you have a winning argument?
Well, not for this statute, although I'm trying to suggest ways in which Texas and Utah might be able to strengthen their statute. I think what we really need is some additional amendments to the Constitution that's going to make clear that the Supreme Court has misconstrued the Commerce Clause and the Necessary and Proper Clause of the Constitution. I think nothing short of amendments such as that is going to get this country and get federalism back on the road again.
What about the idea that the states like Montana, for instance, when they joined, they didn't think that they were joining something that would have all this regulation. The federal government has changed the deal since states like Montana joined.
Well, there's absolutely no constitutional doctrine that says that the powers of the federal government are dictated by any understanding that any people of a territory had when they applied to become a state in the Union. And so I don't think that argument, even though in principle you might be sympathetic with it, I don't think that argument's going to fly in the Supreme Court.
Okay. Thank you very much. By the way, we're going to follow this story all week, and we have a special 1 hour on it on Friday. Gun rights. You don't want to miss it this Friday. And tonight's show, what have we been talking about all the way through? It has a theme. We'll tie it all together next.